The official record is simple: an ancient collision knocked Uranus sideways. Harmless. Historical. Closed. The 1986 Voyager 2 telemetry disagrees. January 1986. Flyby confirmed. The transmitted data did not depict a passive tilted world, it mapped a magnetic containment shield physically fractured, offset 60 degrees from the planetary core. Not misaligned. Fractured. The incoming data did not depict a passive, tilted world, but a planetary containment shield decentralized by a staggering 60 degrees, completely missing the planet's core. The local geometry of the magnetic field was not merely misaligned, it was physically fractured, behaving less like a natural barrier and more like a corrupted machine experiencing a systemic failure. On Earth, Mission Control watched the incoming feeds in clinical silence. The telemetry streams were restricted without warning, attempting to mask a structural reality the instruments could not ignore. Initially, researchers dismissed the bizarre readings as a hardware malfunction, desperate to categorize the erratic data as a sensor glitch in the probe's aging instruments. But the radiation signatures possessed a mathematical certainty, proving this was not an equipment error, but a fundamental breakdown of local physics. What happens when a magnetic barrier bleeds? The illusion of safety was erased, leaving behind a terrifying reality: the planet's magnetic axis was actively grinding against the vacuum. The 1986 dataset proves that Uranus is not a dormant anomaly, but a live, ongoing record of a thermodynamic collapse happening right inside our sector of the galaxy. If a planetary shield can physically fracture and operate like a broken gear, systematically opening its doors to the violent universe, what guarantees the permanent stability of the local heliospheric shield? To bypass the comforting academic consensus and uncover the exact physical anomalies the mainstream refuses to investigate, subscribe to this channel, and let the raw data speak for itself. The planetary void surrounding Uranus registers a continuous, structural hemorrhage. High-energy plasma from the solar wind does not glide across a stable magnetosphere, it breaches directly into the atmospheric layers. The local vacuum dynamics show a containment shield completely severed from the core's gravitational center. There is no passive rotation in the dark, only the friction of a shattered magnetic geometry violently colliding with deep space. Standard peer-reviewed celestial mechanics mandate that a primordial impact would leave a planet with a stable, albeit misaligned, magnetic dipole. Under that model, the deflection of cosmic radiation must remain uniform, creating a consistent off-axis barrier. But the raw data from the void demonstrates a massive, localized absence of magnetic pressure. The physical scale of the incoming radiation obliterates the hypothesis of a stable equilibrium, proving the classical equations cannot contain the thermodynamic reality. The fracture geometry is not inert. The telemetry maps active displacement of magnetic lines across fixed coordinate intervals. A dormant, tilted sphere would simply rotate in a freezing vacuum, shielding itself consistently. But the telemetry maps an active, volatile grinding of magnetic lines tearing against themselves. The model fails. If this geometry is merely the inert scar of an ancient collision, why does the radiation influx spike with mechanical precision? The thermodynamic signature dictates that the anomaly is not a historical bruise, but an active, structural rupture. The local vacuum proves the barrier is not holding. The classical containment model does not account for what the thermal sensors recorded. If the planet was simply knocked sideways billions of years ago, what is actively prying its magnetic containment apart today? The sensor did not malfunction. The geometry did not drift. Something is operating on the shield from the outside. The localized decay of the magnetic barrier is not arbitrary, it operates with terrifying, geometric recurrence. As the fractured core completes its daily rotation, the decentralized axis creates a sweeping distortion that functions exactly like a massive, corrupted valve. The magnetic lines are forced into a mechanical physical oscillation, displacing, fracturing, and reconnecting across the void. The vacuum registers this rhythmic collapse across exact coordinate vectors. The thermodynamic reality proves a systemic failure of atmospheric containment. Before the fractured axis reaches peak displacement, the localized void registers standard magnetic deflection. At maximum offset, the barrier physically vanishes, allowing unshielded plasma to breach the atmospheric boundary directly. Aligns with the solar wind, allowing massive quantities of unshielded, high-energy plasma to plunge directly into the planetary geometry. The standard magnetospheric model predicts a continuous wall of pressure. The archived observational data proves a recurrent, physical absence of the shield itself. The coordinates map an exact, repeating cycle of containment loss that completely invalidates the concept of a stable planetary core. The geometry of the fracture forces a calculated injection of deep space radiation at fixed intervals. It is mechanical. How does a planetary structure sustain a rhythmic, physical opening of its magnetic shield without undergoing total thermodynamic collapse? The repeating geometry of this magnetic hemorrhage proves that local planetary shields are not immutable, permanent barriers. They are fragile, temporary architectures fully capable of localized structural failure. The mechanical rhythm of this decay acts as an empirical record of an ice giant actively losing its isolation against the lethal vacuum. Leave alike to force this mathematical evidence through the algorithmic suppression of academic consensus. But the geometry of the fracture does not stop at the planetary boundary. The coordinates extend outward. The vector has a destination. The 1986 Voyager 2 telemetry holds deeper, far more destructive physical layers than the initial geometry of the planetary shield. Beyond the localized magnetic fracture, the background radiation sensors captured a secondary structural anomaly. The rhythmic influx of high-energy plasma was not merely bleeding into the atmosphere, but was being systematically funneled from a distinct geometric vector originating outside the local system. The raw telemetry proves that the broken axis is not just a localized failure. The archived Voyager 2 data contains a secondary coordinate set, a plasma vector originating $19.20 from the planetary center, that was never entered into the public JPL mission database. It is acting as a mechanical conduit for an external cosmic force. This funneling effect dictates that the mechanical decay is merely a node in a much larger structural degradation cascade, one that possesses a measurable, expanding trajectory through the vacuum. Institutional Astrophysics Archives instantly classified this directional telemetry under corrupted solar wind designations, permanently muting civilian observatory access to the vector coordinates. But the void continued to record the expanding fracture. The structural degradation is not contained, it is actively carving a corridor of magnetic destabilization across deep space. Standard models insist that magnetic decay remains permanently isolated to the affected celestial body, physically unable to propagate across the interstellar medium. Yet, the radiation data demonstrates a systematic unraveling of the vacuum itself, spreading outward along the exact coordinates of the incoming plasma. How does a localized planetary rupture trigger a cascading collapse of surrounding spatial pressure without leaving a detectable thermal boundary at the propagation edge? This expanding degradation vector proves the thermodynamic failure is not static, but highly mobile. The trajectory mapped by the 1986 telemetry indicates that the magnetic unraveling is propagating along a precise mathematical curve through the deep cosmic environment. If the mechanical rupture at Uranus is simply an early intersection point, the trajectory has already been calculated. The corridor of collapsed physics has a next coordinate. That coordinate is not arbitrary. The trajectory of the expanding magnetic degradation is now physically intersecting the outer heliospheric boundaries of our sector. The geometric vector extrapolated from the Uranus anomaly is actively compromising the surrounding interstellar medium, forcing neighboring celestial bodies and icy remnants of the Kuiper belt into a field-null corridor completely bereft of protective magnetic tension. The physical borders are dissolving. Local solar space is exposed. It is a systematic erasure. As the collapse breaches this cosmic frontier, the environmental degradation becomes a tactile, mechanical stripping. Planetary microstructures and rogue asteroids caught in the intersection suffer relentless gravitational shearing, their latent magnetic fields fractured by the overpowering thermal vacuum of the anomaly. The structural integrity of these celestial bodies is not merely damaged by the radiation, it is mathematically dismantled, leaving raw, frozen rock exposed to absolute thermodynamic stripping. The sheer volume of this propagating rupture entirely dwarfs the stable geometry of our entire solar perimeter. As the magnetic rupture forces its massive scale against the fragile, outer magnetic heliopause, the localized physics we blindly rely upon are rendered mathematically irrelevant. What localized mechanism could register the full geometric scale of a thermodynamic failure operating across millions of cubic kilometers of interstellar medium? The measurement itself exceeds the instrument. The violation of this frontier proves that the magnetic fracture is not an isolated planetary accident, but a systemic physical purge actively crossing into our immediate sector. The protective heliospheric bubble shielding our solar environment is actively grinding against a mathematically certain thermodynamic collapse. To ensure this critical physical evidence survives the suppression of institutional consensus, you must share this video with those willing to look at the raw telemetry, forcing the truth of our breaking cosmos into the public record before the data is quietly erased. The vector of magnetic degradation requires no atmospheric friction to accelerate. It mathematically dismantles the interstellar medium itself. As the thermodynamic collapse breaches the wider solar neighborhood, localized gravitational fields are mechanically stripped of their energetic tension. Orbiting bodies and primordial dust clouds do not burn, they enter an absolute pressure absence, mechanically suppressed by the absolute absence of structural pressure. The speed of this degradation operates entirely outside the boundaries of classical celestial mechanics. Local physics demands centuries for planetary atmospheres to bleed out, yet the expanding anomaly strips entire solar barriers in a matter of hours. The sheer kinetic scale of the fracture overwrites the gravitational laws that bind surrounding star systems, forcing atomic structures to unspool seamlessly into the deep freeze of the void. The mathematical certainty of this propagation renders any localized defense physically impossible. A planetary shield cannot intercept an anomaly that has already erased the fundamental laws of thermodynamics within its vector. How do you reinforce a magnetic barrier when the physical concept of pressure no longer exists? The math is absolute. There is no variable left to solve. The propagating fracture does not register resistance. It processes mass as state change, compression to void, structure to static. The consumption is not destruction. It is reclassification. It grinds forward mechanically, completely indifferent to the physical composition of the celestial bodies in its path. The thermal vacuum expands with a cold, unrelenting trajectory, proving that the destruction of local cosmic architecture is not a distant possibility, but an immediate structural inevitability. The mechanical indifference of the advancing vacuum brings the forensic timeline full circle. The 1986 Voyager 2 telemetry is no longer just a historical record of a fractured Uranian shield, it is the definitive, empirical proof of our own approaching physical collapse. The data logged by that aging probe serves as the ultimate forensic verdict, confirming that the planetary hemorrhage has never stopped, only expanded its geometric reach. As the magnetic shearing grinding relentlessly through the outer heliopause, crushing the last natural barriers of our sector, institutional observatories on Earth systematically initiate their blackout protocols. Raw telemetry mapping the incoming thermal vacuum is forcefully replaced by artificial static on public servers. While the deep space anomaly physically dismembers the protective edges of our solar system, bureaucratic agencies silently take independent observation networks offline, intentionally erasing the physical record of the incoming collapse. The forensic cage is completely sealed. There is no orbital correction, no technological countermeasure, and no academic rationalization capable of rebuilding a shattered physical dimension. What is the value of an astronomical model when the universe it describes is actively being deleted? The barrier is dead. The physics recorded it. Then went silent. The barrier is dead. The expanding thermodynamic collapse guarantees that the protective geometry we have blindly trusted is already mathematically erased. As the magnetic fracture crosses our absolute threshold, you must decide how to categorize the end of our local physics. In the comments, type noise if you desperately choose to believe this planetary hemorrhage is just an institutional sensor glitch, or type fracture if you understand the brutal mathematics of the approaching void. The physics will not wait for our consensus.